how do you calculate your calories and macros for keto with not having to use a lot of math?
Yeah, that's the trick, right? Nobody wants to use up a whole notebook sheet trying to figure out what the heck are my macros. And we get so many questions around this. I wanted to break it down. So first of all, what is a macro?
A macro, like think about micro and macroeconomics. Like macros, the big categories of calories that go into our bodies. So think protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Those are all at the macro level.
And we include alcohol as a macro as well.
Right, it's sometimes known as the fourth macro or the kind of the hidden macro because it acts a little bit differently in the body.
Yeah, so whenever you drink alcohol, it's immediately prioritized and it shuts off lipolysis.
Right, so oxidative priority, alcohol kind of usurps the whole process and says, hey body, I know you don't have a storage system for me, so you need to process me right away to clear me out of your system, right? So that's why we kind of say this is a fourth macro because of the way it acts in the body and demands attention so quickly.
Yeah. So how do you figure out your macros? So I want to run through just generally how you do it before talking a little bit about how to automate this and not do a lot of math. So we recommend you start with your carbohydrate goal. So you would pick a number anywhere between 20 and 50 grams when you're talking about nutritional ketosis. Now, if you're doing keto for therapeutic reasons, you're probably working with a doctor, and they may have you as low as 10 grams. So the keto diet was originally created for epileptics, and it was actually the first line of treatment before a lot of the medications came into the picture. So then choose a carbohydrate goal. So 20 to 50 grams, and then you want to choose a fat goal. So this is going to require a little trial and error. So fat will be somewhere between 65 and 80%.
Right, and fat is that macro that you play with, right? You move that number up and down as your weight is kind of changing, right? So if you wanted to try and lose more body fat, you would actually bring your fat intake down a little bit in order to get your body to use stored body fat as a fuel source. If you're at your goal weight, you might actually increase your fat percentage so that you can maintain your weight and get that fat, the fat as fuel from your diet rather than from your body.
And then finally, the rest, what's left over, is protein. So there is a lot to know about protein goals, but that's going to be beyond the scope of today's session. We're going to go into that later on another live stream. So the best way to figure this out, to make it easy, is to use an online tool. And our favorite online tool is Chronometer. So I actually posted a deep dive video earlier today on YouTube, and you'll find the link in the description of this so that you can kind of I walk you exactly through how to set things up, how to enter all the information, the different types of calculators and the different styles of keto inside of Chronometer. So Chronometer is used by like Atkins for research. So it's really kind of what I consider the gold standard of a keto app. So the free version will get you everything you need. You can find a link in our coupons and discounts page for a free account. And so there's a few tips that we want to share with you.
So you really don't want to have more than 250 calories deficit per day, right? Any more than that, and you're kind of venturing into this territory of severe caloric restriction, and you're not really fasting, you're actually depriving your body of calories that it needs to function, right? So anything more than 250 is just too far.
Especially in the beginning. So if you've been in keto for years and years, maybe a little bit more of a calorie deficit is okay. But when you're very first starting out on keto, you're asking your body to relearn a lot of processes. And what happens is when we restrict calories to a very low level, our body shuts off a lot of non-essential processes. Now, these non-essential processes are still very important for our health. Autophagy is one.
Right. But you're really sending your body mixed signals if you go to a like 500 or maybe even 1,000 calorie deficit when you're just getting into the keto diet, because you're saying I'm taking away your primary fuel source, but I'm also just taking away fuel in general, right? Calories as fuel. So taking away too much all at once is really kind of a recipe for disaster. So you really want to limit it until you get really comfortable with being in ketosis and how that feels, and then start playing with your calories a little more. And, most people will find that they're probably pretty good at eating, whatever they were eating before. A lot of people do really well at the same calorie levels they were at before, just switching over to ketosis.
Yeah, so how many of you track your macros and your calories? Drop us a yes or no in the comments. So the next tip is not to get overwhelmed by all the different methods. Every single expert out there, every single MD, PhD that's talking about keto and instructing people how to do it, they're going to teach you a different way to do it. So don't get overwhelmed. Just pick one method and stick with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, if you're trying to build a new habit, if you're constantly tweaking and trying to do something new when you're a beginner, it's really hard to get good at it if you're not doing the same thing over and over. So find somebody that resonates with you, whether that's one of the many YouTube keto doctors, or maybe us, or somebody else in this space that really resonates with you. They have a good way of explaining it, and you like that method, and it works for you in your everyday life, then use that.
Yeah. So when do you adjust macros? Well, anytime you stop getting results. And if you're not tracking right now, if you have been stuck in a plateau, you're frustrated with the results you're getting, that is a signal that you need to go back and do something like go through this calculator, enter all your information, and play around with your macros. So what we encourage you to do is every time you hit a plateau or a weight loss stall, just look at it as a new experiment. So now you need to form a new hypothesis, right? We learned in school, you form a hypothesis and you test the hypothesis. And this is the same thing.
Yeah, it's just testing on yourself. They call it an N of 1 experiment, right? You are the variable.
Yeah, so just go back to the drawing board and figure things out again. Now, one thing I like about Chronometer and a lot of these other tools is every time you update your weight, it's going to adjust your calorie needs.
And that's what, a lot of people that don't use an online tool like Chronometer or something forget to go back and say, well, I've dropped 10 pounds. What does that do to my basal metabolic rate? What does that do to my daily calorie needs? Some people who have been on keto for a long time might have lost 40 or 50 pounds and forgotten about it and never really went back and readjusted. Well, there's a lot of variation there in the 40, 50 pound range. So you really could spend some time, go back and readjust.
Yeah. And one mistake people make is they think that just because all the food that they eat is keto, that they're eating within the correct macros. And that's not accurate. Because so cheese is keto, but if I ate cheese all day, my macros are going to be way off. So you can't trust that just because a food is keto means that you're hitting the correct macros. So if you're struggling to get results and you're not tracking your food and you're just eating keto foods how you want to, this would be a great experiment to do. What would happen if you challenge yourself to go ahead and use Chronometer, figure out your macros, and track your food, even if it's just 3 or 4 days a week? That can give you some really great information.
Yeah, and I always like to think, like words really matter. So we use the term like keto foods because it's quick and expedient for us to talk like that. But keto is not a food. Keto is a metabolic state that your body is in, right? Ketogenic. So foods can promote a ketogenic body, or they can take away from a ketogenic body, right? So foods themselves aren't keto. They just fit into that lifestyle, or they really don't. So just know that when we're talking about keto foods, we're not saying like, these foods are keto and these aren't. It's just, what do they support?
Yeah. And check your language. Like your self-talk. If you are listening to this and you're saying, well, nothing that I do matters, it doesn't work, check yourself. Because the question is, if I came into your house and I watched you eat for a week, Do you think that you would be perfectly in line with the macros you need to be getting? How many, would I be able to go back and look and see how many times you've made adjustments or done experiments? So challenge yourself to have an open mind to trying new things and taking on new challenges, because that is what any effort to get healthy requires. It requires you to check those excuses at the door, to push them out the door and get rid of them so that you can get the results that you want to get.